Hey everyone, this is Matt from endsickness.org. Today I'm going to talk about autoimmune disease and discuss why mast cells are the main target if you're focused on autoimmune disease and why they are the origin of all your autoimmune symptoms. This is from someone who had fibromyalgia. I've worked with hundreds of people and I just want to share my experiences with you today. So first let me say I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'm not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. It's for information and educational purposes only. So let me get back to it. So the mast cells, what are mast cells? These are the main immune cell that's responsible for telling your other immune cells what to do. And they send out inflammatory molecules that, and anti-inflammatory molecules that tell those immune cells how to act, basically. So your mast cells are either your best friend or your worst enemy when you have an autoimmune disease. So when you have an autoimmune disease, what happens is that these mast cells become overpopulated because you've been triggered so many times by things in your environment, in your diet, in your, behaviors, your stress, your lifestyle, that the immune system becomes triggered. And as it does, more and more mast cells populate. You get higher and higher levels of these mast cells, and they become more conditioned to secrete inflammatory molecules over time. And these mast cells, if you could stop them from overreacting, you can get them to stop sending the inflammatory molecules that are responsible for your symptoms, okay? So how do we get the mast cells to stop reacting? Okay, I get your point, Matt. I believe that the mast cells are tied to autoimmune disease. So how do we do anything about this? Well, the first thing we have to do is make sure that all the supplements we're taking all modulate mast cells. They all calm down mast cells. In addition, they're all plant-derived, okay? Because if they're synthetic, they may feel like they produce a good response initially, and then within a little bit of time, you start reacting, you start seeing an alternate response. Your other symptoms get worse. They start causing problems. And you got to realize anything that's synthetic, your liver, your kidneys, your body has to process. It puts more stress on the detox system. Eventually, it puts stress on the immune system. So you want only plant-based, plant-derived supplements that modulate mast cells. They calm down the immune system through the mast cell function. They help the gut bacteria grow. They improve detoxification or the detoxification channels. If they check all those boxes, then bingo, bingo, bingo. That's what you're looking for when it comes to supplements for autoimmune disease. If all your supplements don't check those boxes, you say, well, Matt, how do I even figure out if this has an effect on mast cells? Well, go to your AI chatbot or go to Google and type in this particular ingredient or supplement and see if it calms down mast cells or stops allergy response. If so, guess what? It might be a good fit if it's a single ingredient supplement. If it's 20 ingredients in a supplement, just throw it out the window. It's worthless. It's not going to be a good choice if you have a chronic illness, okay? So back to the other things that could go ahead and be really important for the mast cells. So we talked about the supplements, all right? We talked about what not to do, at least with the supplements. So the diet. We want to remove the foods that are most likely to go ahead and irritate the mast cells. These are dairy, nuts, seeds, gluten, eggs, processed food, too much meat. These things all create inflammatory responses. And if you already have a chronic inflammatory condition going on, you don't want to trigger it even further by consuming foods that are hard to break down. And when those foods aren't broken down fully, what happens when you have a leaky gut, when you have an autoimmune disease, you have a leaky gut, okay? When you eat these foods that are hard to break down, they don't digest fully, and little pieces of them break and go into the bloodstream. And when that happens, the immune system flares up, systemic symptoms that you call autoimmune disease. But in fact, they're just little bits of food going into your bloodstream and then the immune system flaring up and causing symptoms wherever you show your symptoms, right? And this is what happens. So you remove those foods. You focus on primarily your fruits, vegetables, potatoes, rice, beans. If you're doing mostly animal products or those foods, you want to gradually reduce the animal products as you increase the plants. You want to definitely remove the gluten, eggs, nuts, dairy, seeds, processed food first, and then slowly reduce the meat as you increase the amount of fruits, vegetables, beans, rice, potatoes, etc., right? Next thing you want to go ahead and check mast cells is if you're having lots of reactions, you have a chronic illness, you're very sick, then you want to check into mycotoxins, okay? Mycotoxins are always important when you're looking at something that could trigger your symptoms, okay? If you want to check your mycotoxin levels, you go simply and get an antibody blood test from mymycolab.com. More information on that, go to their website, you'll learn more. I am not someone referring anybody in business to them. I'm just using this myself. And you don't need a doctor to get this test. It's the only way to be able to determine if your mycotoxin levels are issues, or mycotoxin levels are a problem, right? The next thing you also want to think about when it comes to the environment is you want to make sure you have plenty of ventilation, fresh air, you know? You don't want to have a bunch of chemicals in the air, you know, you're cleaning chemicals, you're cooking, you know, you're your shower, your everything like that is going into the air, but you're not ventilating it all, and your air quality is messed up. This can affect your mast cells, right? This can affect your mast cells. The last part I want to mention after the fragrances and whatnot is your sleeping patterns, your behavior patterns, the amount of exercise you get, how much stress you're going through, your emotions, you know, all those things. Those things are also very important to monitor and pay attention to. If you're starting to feel worse after you have an emotional swing or after you exercise or when you don't sleep, then you need to pay attention to these things and make changes to be able to improve. The mast cells are triggered by nearly anything. It's what we're eating, what we're inhaling, what we're thinking, what we're doing, you know, what we're perceiving. All those things affect the mast cells, but they are the reason that your autoimmune symptoms are there. You want to learn more about how to overcome autoimmune disease? Go to my page, nsickness.org. I got hundreds of articles, one specifically about autoimmune disease and getting over it and with the steps to do it. So thanks for watching, everybody. Go to my page.